Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
First off, who wants to be in a business that's not growing? Do you know of any 8 players that want to stay in a business that's not growing? I don't know any. We're going through seismic changes in the staffing industry. I mean, we haven't even started talking about AI. We can't sell the way that we used to sell. We cannot position ourselves the way we used to position.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
This is an important episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. As a whole, the recruiting and staffing world has had 36 negative months. Months where it has not gone up. Months where it's been going down. And it's been impacting the entire industry. You've seen it. You've talked to your friends. There are recruiters out there that are just absolutely struggling. But here's the thing. There are firms out there that are growing in this environment. They're winning hand over fist. They have figured out what to do in this market to win. I'm so excited about this episode because I have an expert with me, Tom Kosnik, who is the advisor to so many of these firms. He mostly works in firms like they're typically like the 25 to the 100 million mark and some over $350 million a year. So he understands what's happening. But here's the thing. He understands how these companies are winning. And I'm so excited to have him kind of just break it down, help us figure out how we can get ahead. So Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Benjamin. Very glad to be here.
So, okay, we always get started. Well, actually, typically we get started like how you got into recruiting. But before we do that, the VIIs group, what is that?
Yeah, we are a middle market organizational development, growth strategy consulting firm, 100% dedicated to the staffing industry. Our clients are anywhere from startups to north of $2 billion in revenue. And half of our business, we manage a peer roundtable program. We have close to 100 C-suite execs in 9 different peer roundtables that we manage. And then the other half of the business, we do organizational development, growth strategy consulting, which could be business planning, sales planning, assessments on organizations, compensation assessments, compensation redesign, a whole wide variety of things. And it's not just myself. I've got a dozen subject matter experts that have years and years and years of experience in the industry that can work with me either on understanding improving the tech stack or improving the sales system or improving the recruiting or improving the back office, whatever the challenge is that the business is having. We do have some folks on board that can do the coaching, but organizational development, we really focus on helping the C-suite team grow the entity, increase the asset value of the business they own.
And that's actually why I'm so glad that we got hooked up, because you see this back end, you see what's exactly, you're in the weeds, seeing what companies are doing, seeing what's working and what's not working. And most importantly, the companies where it's not working, how they can change to make it work.
Yes. So imagine in our peer roundtable, every 4 to 6 months, we have 100 or so C-suite execs that are talking about what's going on in their business, what's working, what's not working. And we hear all that. We have access to all that information.
Before we dive into that, how did you even end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Oh my gosh, it's you can look at my website. This is a true story, by the way. I was making a career change. Long story short, I was studying to be ordained in the Catholic Church as a priest. Somewhere near the end of my master's at divinity, I realized ordained ministry was not the calling. I was too close to finishing a master's degree, and I'm 100% Polish. And one thing you know about Polish people is that they always finish what they start. And so I'm like, I'm too close. I've got to finish this master's degree. So I finished the master's degree, got a job in the Chicagoland area, and then met my wife, got married. And her father, who owned maybe a half a dozen different businesses, one of the businesses that he owned was a staffing business. I needed to make a change. I always say if I was a rabbi or if I was a Baptist minister, I probably could have stayed in the faith. But trying to be a layperson in the Catholic Church and raise a family, and it's just tough making ends meet that way. But anyway, so I called up my father-in-law, and he got me introduced into a gentleman that was putting together these peer roundtables, and one thing ended up in another, and we started working together. And just real quick, so there we were. Of course, my father-in-law, he never does anything small, so he had he had 4 of us that were going to start roundtables. And, one guy said, hey, I'm going to do vice presidents of engineers. And I was, hey, I'm going to do CFOs. And hey, I'm going to do vice presidents of engineers. And so my father-in-law looked at me, he says, hey, Tom, the only thing that's left is staffing. Because one of the businesses that he had was a little sales training business. And he used to do sales training for the staffing industry. And I said, of course, I knew nothing about business. This is how crazy things are. I knew nothing about business, but I said, all right, I'll give that a shot. And lo and behold, this was 30 years ago now. I mean, the industry was growing at 12% a year. I think the total annual revenues was, 40, 50 billion, and now it's 200 and something billion in revenue. But the industry was growing at 12% a year. And I just worked hard. And, a few years later, I had, 7, 8 roundtables, and I was 80% of the revenue. So, off we went. We struck a deal, my father-in-law, myself, we struck a deal, and I bought my piece of the business out. And he's been a great mentor to me, actually.
That's phenomenal. So you're going to go to the staffing industry, go figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I had no idea what my liver would need to go through working the conferences. Gosh, you think about the old days, just you go to the conferences and you just, hang out at the bars late at night and you just meet a ton because it's such a people industry. We were so fortunate, frankly. We're in an industry that's been growing for the last 30 years. If you look at every recession, the industry comes back and adds another $20-30 billion on top end. So we've been in the industry growing, but we had just wonderful clients. They're great people. They care about their employees. They want to make good decisions. They want to grow their businesses. I really enjoyed my time in the staffing industry and servicing the industry. It's really been a gift to me.
Talk about a start. Like, once again, just stumbling into the recruiting world.
Yeah. Isn't that how we all end up in the recruiting?
Pretty much.
Recruiting staffing. It's like nobody goes to college to say, hey, I want to get into the staffing industry.
I want to get it down and dirty. It's been rough for a lot of recruiting companies. Let's focus on the market as a whole right now. What are you seeing?
Well, you're seeing on the commercial side, the light industrial side, my clients are telling me that their clients are saying, hey, we know you guys, we like you guys, but we just don't need you. And we just don't have any open orders. There are a handful of economists that I follow and some economic institutions that I follow. And so manufacturing, no big surprise, inflation, after COVID, we're back up to maximum credit card debt. Savings are back down to what they were pre-COVID. So, people can only spend so much money. They only have so much resources. So consumer spending, and the reason why we look at consumer spending is it's about 70% of the economy, 70% of the economy. So it's a big statistic we look at. But if people aren't buying things, manufacturers are not manufacturing things, so the demand that drops. And so manufacturing has been in a decline. So on a commercial side, okay, you have the decline on the manufacturing side. So then you might say, Benjamin, well, Tom, isn't that a great time for manufacturers to use temporary staffing? Yes, it is a good time. But in comes the whole immigration. And this is on the commercial side, hospitality side, entertainment, these jobs that are whatever they, $15 to $22 an hour jobs, where a lot of manufacturers are hiring the recent immigrants that are coming into the country versus utilizing a staffing business. And just want to be real, clear here. We need immigration, right? We need immigration. And in fact, I think the United States is, at the point where we're not birthing enough people to keep our population where it needs to, which is another economic indicator that you look at it. Hey, if a population is shrinking, the economy is shrinking. If the population is growing, the economy is growing. Economics 101. So on the commercial side, you have manufacturing that has been in decline. You have the immigration where manufacturers are hiring immigrants versus using staffing firms. On the professional side, Benjamin, quietly, their clients are nearshoring and offshoring hundreds of jobs. We used to think that whole offshore thing was the big companies that had big IT departments, and well, we're going to send half of these workers, we're going to utilize workers in India, and our pay rate and all that. Well, I mean, small businesses offshoring and utilizing offshore resources to fulfill their jobs, fulfill the work that needs to be done in their businesses. And that has a big effect on the professional staffing, whether you're in engineering, IT, accounting, finance, life sciences. That has a big effect. And it also has a big effect on the direct hire recruiting side. Regardless of who you talk to, clients, like nobody, it's a love-hate relationship, right? No one likes to pay $25,000 fees. And I've got clients that do high-end retained searches. I mean, those are, $90,000 to $110,000, $120,000 fees. So companies aren't jumping up and down to pay those fees, and they're always looking at ways to, hey, can we do this ourselves? Hence that whole thing, like pre-COVID, when all that on the supply side, the candidate side, when it was so tight, so restricted, you had how many companies? All those big companies were hiring recruiters, paying them $100K base salary, $110K base salary, and the variable was $10,000, 15 grand, something like that. But they're thinking, well, gosh, if I hire a recruiter, bring them on board, let them work from home if they want, but if they just do one hire a month, I'm saving 25 grand. So 25 times 12, 225, I do the numbers, the finance guy, let's go hire a bunch of recruiters and let's get a recruiter. Let's get Benjamin to manage these remote recruiters. He's a good guy. He knows what he's doing. And, and off we go. So, that was the whole pre-COVID thing. But now it's like companies are offshoring, nearshoring, and they're also utilizing Upwork. They're utilizing people that have very specific skills on many projects. We don't need to hire a proposal writer. Let's go to Upwork and find a proposal writer and just, contract by contract by contract versus hiring somebody full-time and paying for benefits and paying for place for them to work and their phone and their internet at home if it's remote. So my clients, they're trying to figure it out like we're trying to figure it out. They've gone through the wage inflation thing just like we've gone through the wage inflation. Well, anyway, I could talk for a while.
Well, I mean, it just shows the reality of what's out there. And we have to figure out and face what the reality is. But here's what I definitely am excited about. How are these companies out there winning and growing in an environment that's tougher than it's been in a long time?
And you're talking about staffing clients, correct?
Staffing and recruiting firms.
You got to get creative. You have to start having different kinds of conversations with your clients than you had before. If you think you're going to grow your business by hiring a bunch of sales guys, knocking on doors, asking for job orders, good luck. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I'm connected with people that, frankly, I mean, they're far more experienced in staffing than I am and managing $500 million business units. And these folks are, these quote unquote, I mean, these folks are saying to me, look, if you think that you're going to grow your business by utilizing the same sales methodologies that you did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, good luck. Not going to happen. How are these companies doing it? Well, they're having different kinds of conversations with their clients. They're getting deeper into their clients to say to their clients, they're bringing value-add information. And this is more than a wage, salary, survey. They're bringing them data on demographics, data on wages, data on wage inflation, on specific jobs in specific geographical markets. And they're having these different conversations, asking the questions, guys, what your human capital acquisition strategy, what is it? How can you make it better, faster? How can you utilize outside services to bring the kind of talent that you need? What kind of talent do you need? Do you know what kind of talent you need? A lot of these large organizations, frankly, even though they're, billions in revenue or millions in revenue, a lot of those large organizations, their HR departments are not that sophisticated in terms of human capital acquisition strategies. And those HR departments are stretched, thin, just like any other departments in those big companies. But the staffing companies are having those kinds of conversations with their clients, and they're positioning, great word, positioning themselves to be a consultant, to be an advisor, to be a different kind of an organization than somebody that's just going to find them bodies that they can place. And then you've got to be smart enough. You have to have enough capital. You have to be Whether you're investing in a certain business idea, you got to be smart enough to then be able to come back to your client with a creative solution to help them achieve what they want to achieve. Is there going to be business out there, job order, go out and get me job orders and when our recruiters will fulfill it? Yeah, sure. Low hanging fruit. But I mean, come on. If you're looking to grow a business, what do you need? Client satisfaction and client retention. When you've got 30% turnover rates, 40% to client turnover rates, good luck. You're never going to grow your business.
Let's just open up two questions. First question is going to be, has some of these large recruiting companies and just the way the market is, have they changed some of their offers that they're offering their clients? Or is it just how they're approaching their clients?
Well, you know what's going on. The large staffing firms are, Tom, instead of 30 outbound sales calls, you got to start making 60 outbound sales calls. Oh, we need to hire sales. I mean, you've seen it switch almost overnight. And that's, by the way, that's both on the direct hire side and the contract side of the business. In short, the way that they've responded is, hey, let's put the gas pedal on the sales. And anyway, it's just, that's not a viable long-term solution. And the reason why I say that, Benjamin, is that, hey, we don't realize it, but we're going through seismic changes in the staffing industry. I mean, we haven't even started talking about AI and what that's doing to the industry. But we can't sell the way that we used to sell. We cannot position ourselves the way we used to position. The buyers are so much more sophisticated. You've got to bring value add. It's more than bodies. It's more than, okay, yes, recruiting, we're doing what they can't do. We can recruit in places where they can't recruit. Sure, we get all that. But where those used to be differentiators, those are now table stakes. Tom, if you can't even do that, there's the door. See you later. Right?
We're going to talk about more growth in a second, but I've been talking with a lot of people about what's coming forward, and you just mentioned we're on the cusp of seismic changes in our industry. From all the people that you talk to and the network and the vision that you could see based on the conversations that you have and the places that you work with people on, what do you mean by seismic change?
Well, here's what I mean. A couple things. One, many clients of staffing firms and many staffing firms use offshore recruiters, either in the Philippines or in India, to source candidates. Scrape the job boards, send emails, all that stuff. For $1,000 or $1,250 or $1,500 a month, they can get a sourcer to do that. Well, that job task is today fully automated to the point where you can manage it through a technology automation. So it's not going to happen overnight, but this is the crystal ball. All that offshore sourcing, you're going to start seeing it decline. The smarter, more astute the clients of staffing firms and staffing firms, they'll invest in the technology and make it happen. So that's one dynamic. The other dynamic that's happening in the industry is, and again, the whole automation, the whole AI, the language models, man, it's just happening at lightning speeds to the point where for most of us, it's even overwhelming. And I'm no expert in any of this, but when you think about training people, when you think about, I'll tell you, I was at a conference, TA Tech, they're the job board conference, and they had a keynote speaker, which was a CHRO of a hospital in city of New York. And he's giving his presentation and he throws up clicks a button on his laptop and up pops this AI of a nurse. Hello, my name is Sharon and I'm here to do the first phase interview with you. Can you spell your name for me? He goes, he plays it for 3 minutes. And this is 1.5 years ago. So, I mean, what's it now? Who knows what that technology is like now? But anyway, he stops it for 3 minutes. He said, hey, we got 25 recruits. We have 25 recruiters, in our hospital system. He says, what do you think those 25 recruiters said when I showed them this video?
There goes my job.
Here's the other kicker. Again, that we're not thinking, you're not reading about this, but candidates, the kids that are coming out of school, the millennials, the later millennials, and the kids coming out of school now, they'd rather talk to a bot than a recruiter. Benjamin, I like you. nice guy and all, but what are the job opportunities? What do I need to get you? Can I fill it out on my iPhone?
I did an interview last week with a company that a hiring manager could put in a JD and it'll automatically go source, have conversations, do the recruiting screen, and then schedule the interviews on the hiring manager's calendar. And once the interview's done, build out a scorecard.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about. Seismic. I'm afraid to say that for a lot of these recruiting firms, it's like the frog that's in the water that's getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And then, and the frog wakes up one morning and they're in heaven. How'd I get here?
And, that's another thing I want to talk about. What's worked 5 years ago doesn't work today. What worked even 3 years ago isn't working today. How can somebody prepare for this future? But how can they grow their company right now?
You have to have some way to not necessarily be on the bleeding edge, but you have to have the technology innovation to understand what that is, how it's unfolding, and how I can bring that into my business, number one. So a lot of small to mid-size staffing businesses, they just don't have the internal resources to do that. They don't have the internal resources to do that. So number one, you have to have some way, and whether you contract it out on a contract basis through an external person, some way to have a Benjamin or to have, a Tom or to have a Diane that is going to understand what that technology is and then bring those ideas into the business where, okay, let's take a look at this and can we use this to make our recruiters more efficient and more effective? So more efficient, more effective means more gross profit production on a month-to-month basis, more interviews, more starts, whatever it is. For the last 10 years, 12 years, companies have spent thousands of dollars on technology. And you look, and the average gross margin, gross profit production per internal resource hasn't changed a dime. I mean, what did you do? I mean, that technology is worthless if it cannot increase gross profit. And that's a little bit of a paradigm shift in terms of how I'm thinking about my technology and bringing it into the business and utilizing it. So that's one piece that has to happen. The other piece that has to happen, so that's an operational efficiency thing that's going on internally. And by the way, get your employees involved. Get your recruiters and salespeople involved. Sales, in the end, somebody's got to talk to somebody. In recruiting, in the end, a human has got to talk to a human. So, I mean, you're not going to automate the entire process, right? Something like this example that you gave, I'm not sure about those jobs and all that. But at these various levels, you're not going to be able to extricate, the entire human contact and relationship. Well, what can we automate in order to get Tom, the recruiter, talking to candidates 6 hours a day instead of 3 hours? Do you remember that? Do you remember the 180 minutes? Benjamin? Do you remember? Yes. Yeah. I mean, the old direct hire guys will tell you, if my recruiters are on the phone talking 180 minutes a day, they're going to be successful. Well, how do you turn 180 minutes into 240 or 300 minutes a day where they're talking to candidates? That's, on the internal operation, automation, improvement side. And it's got to be tied back to production. It's got to be tied back to helping people become more productive. On the sales side, it's having different kinds of conversations with your clients. It's asking different questions. And by the way, asking those different kinds of questions, having those different kinds of conversations, you're positioning yourself as more than a recruiting firm. Those are like two key critical things. We used to say, gosh, I'm at 7 million in revenue and I want to grow to 15 million in revenue. Well, okay, 2 recruiters and a sales guy can do 3.5 million in revenue. So I need to hire 2 new sales guys and 4 new recruiters. That thinking is rapidly passé. It's old school. It just doesn't work that way anymore.
Like, if you want to have those growth numbers, we'll say from 7 to 10 million or 7 to 15 million, like what is the strategy in 2024 and 2025 to actually do that?
We haven't yet talked about the whole marketing piece of it, but marketing used to be maybe whatever, 15, 20% of the sales. I mean, marketing used to be the website and the colors and the business card and the brochures and the presentations, things like that. And marketing now is like 80% of the sales process. And marketing really needs to be tightly aligned with sales, messaging, getting messaging out on social media, helping your recruiters and your salespeople build their personal brand on social media so that people call Benjamin because Benjamin is the guy that places life science people in these skill sets in these kinds of companies. I want to know that guy. And not only do I want to know that guy, I want to stay in touch with that guy because, I'm going to move. I've got aspirations in my career and all that stuff. And he's going to be much more connected than I am. So you want to grow your business. Wow, it's just changed. Just as I'm talking, I'm thinking so many things have changed for us. It's almost overwhelming. But yeah, you want to grow your business. So then it's getting marketing involved in a way that marketing has never been involved in terms of helping get that message out on the internet. And again, so, what does marketing do? This is real simple thinking. It's so simple. But marketing just gets the message out there and pulls prospects back to us, whether it's candidates or buyers, where sales, I'm picking up the phone or I'm working a networking event or I'm working a meetup event. That's the other thing I haven't talked about either. But anyways, the whole marketing piece of it is getting marketing involved and getting marketing aligned. And the consistency is so important. Like if I'm trying to be an advisor to my clients, then that consistent professional message has got to be in the social media across the board. Like whatever, you're doing these podcasts, things like that. Well, I mean, in part kind of a differentiator, but it keeps you in front of your clients and all that. Well, look, I mean, you start inviting a bunch of yahoos on this thing, like talking about whatever, baseball statistics and things like that. After a while, people are like, Benjamin's a nice guy, but, there's no value out of that podcast. So, on and on and on. You're trying to maintain a certain consistency to maintain that client base and that connection. That's all part of your marketing strategy. Same thing's got to happen with a staffing firm, recruiting firm at a certain level. I can't stress, the other thing that I can't stress more, gosh, and my clients are just not even thinking about this, and that is the personal branding of your salespeople and your recruiters. It's just so, you got to cut through your recruiters and your salespeople. They have to have a brand. We're living in a land of influencers, right? I don't have time to listen to influencers. My wife does. Oh, you got to hear this influencer about this recipe or about the color of these drapes against the color of this wall and, whatever, but we're living in a land of influencers. And so your recruiters and your salespeople, they have to become like influencers and cut through the crap of all the other salespeople that are doing what, Benjamin? They're making phone calls. Hello, this is Tom Kosnik. We specialize in recruiting IT professionals. I'd like to find out more about your business. Please call me back at ... Right? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to cut through the crap. And by having this podcast and position yourself in social media, I can't tell you how important that is. Here's another thing that we never used to think about. You're talking about we can't sell, the old Google ratings and all that stuff. First off, if you're not doing Google ratings, you're already screwed. Secondly, if you're not at 3.4 or 3.5 and better, you're screwed. You're hurting yourself. And why is that important? Because 84%, these are valid and reliable statistics, 84% of your candidates, 84% of your clients, prospective clients, are going to look on the Google ratings or some other kinds of ratings, and they're going to trust those ratings more than they're going to trust in a person's referral.
84% of clients are looking?
84%.
It's insane. Well, okay, let me take a step back to like that.
So Benjamin, this is what I'm saying. Like, you've got these small to mid-sized businesses that are, okay, so the numbers are declining. Recruiters aren't like, well, so that, oh, guys, we got to make more dials. We got to hit the phones. We got to do this. We got to, it truly is a paradigm shift. And all that stuff that I've been talking about for the last 7 minutes, that all falls under the camp of the marketing person. And look, if you can't afford $150,000 or $180,000 a year marketing person, then go find a fractional person that can work with your team and get that stuff going in your business. I can tell you intuitively, I'm right, what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But okay, so here's the thing. A lot of what I feel like a lot of companies don't empower their teams to go start building a brand because I think they're afraid that they're going to lose somebody. How do you turn that?
Now you're talking about the power to see ourselves, and why do businesses grow? Because the guy at the top doesn't grow, the woman at the top doesn't grow, the married couple at the top doesn't grow. You got to challenge yourself. You never were their age. It's a different world now, and so the men and women that own these businesses that are afraid to have people build their brands, what I would tell them is let your people build their brand and focus on creating an amazing, engaging culture. That's how you win that. Will occasionally somebody go off on their own. Will occasionally somebody go off, take a job with somebody else because it's 100% remote. Yeah, look, that's life. You're going to have turnover. As long as you know how to hire and onboard people on the front end, which is a whole nother podcast. As long as you know how to do that, then off you go. Yeah.
You started talking about the leader, and I really wanted to dial in on this and talk about the leadership. What type of person is good at scaling a recruiting business?
The people that are good at scaling recruiting businesses, first off, they are constantly in growth mode. They're not happy with the status quo. When I think about, and I tell people this on the front end, every executive that's in our peer roundtable program, they are in growth mode. In other words, and I tell people before they even come, if you're a lifestyle business, if you're a lifestyle minded person, don't come because you'll get run over. After the third meeting, when you come back and you're at the same revenue, people are going to be like, Benjamin, you haven't grown your business in the past year. What's with that? What are you doing over there? But these executives, first off, they're always in growth mode, never happy with the status quo. And I'm not saying they're greedy, right? Because people grow businesses for all kinds of reasons, right? First off, who wants to be in a business that's not growing? Do you know of any A players that want to stay in a business that's not growing? I don't know any. So if you want to attract A players and people, the executive that's growing a recruiting staffing company understands this. They understand that A players are attracted to growing companies. And why are A players attracted to growing companies? Because that's a career path. That's hey, I want to grow from here to here to here to here. And this business is growing and, I want to jump on that train and ride with them. Open to innovation, which we've been talking about innovation and whatever. They're open to change. So you always have to be putting things, you always have to be evaluating, you always have to be improving. We haven't talked about ATS, applicant tracking systems, but how many companies put an applicant tracking system in place and then they utilize 20% of it, 30% of it, and they're really not fully utilizing the ATS system. So when I say open to change, they have an agile process going on within their organizations where they have maybe a cross-functional team that is constantly looking at the ATS. How can we improve it? How can we use it better? How can we, how can this system make our people faster, better, smarter, whatever it is, whether it's automation, whether it's learning how to control something in the software, all that stuff. So they're open to change. They're open to innovation. They're always in growth mode. And here's the other thing is that they're not afraid to talk to competitors. They're not afraid to get in a room and, hey, Benjamin, what's working for you? Hey, Ben, what are you experiencing in the market? So they tend to be highly collaborative. They tend to be, they go to the conferences and not just the staffing conferences. I mean, they'll go to other kinds of conferences that are going to continue to challenge them and that are going to continue to help them develop. So, the person that's successfully growing a business is somebody who is constantly growing, constantly develop, constantly change. And they know that and they seek it out. Some of them will have mentors and coaches. You have peer groups, advisory groups, a board of advisors, informal board of advisors, formal board of directors, all that stuff. To do what? To pound on them. Tom, you're not thinking right. You're going to do what? Why are you going to do that? Where's the cash flow on that? Have you fleshed this idea out? Is there an example of how that worked in other firms before we make this decision? course, Tom doesn't want to hear that because Tom's ego is in between the way of the advice from the board of directors, or board of advisors, or mentor, or coach, or whatever. But eventually, I go home, sulk, have a drink, and okay, well, maybe Benjamin's right. I guess I got to do more research on this before I make this decision. That's the persona of the kind of person that's successfully growing these businesses. And here, let me tell you, get yourself in some kind of a peer group. My God, I have a client that was in one of our peer groups, and he's going off to start his own thing. And he asked the question to the peer group, hey, what is one thing that you would have done differently 15 years ago when you started your business? Unanimously, everybody around the table said, I would have found a group of executives like this to join, to be a part of. It would have saved me so much headache, time, mistakes, money, all that. That's the persona of the people I find growing.
So this isn't the quick fire questions, but we're going to kind of do a quick fire of growing a company from 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 25.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So if you can really just
1 to 5, working 80 hours a week.
Well, in each of these, if you can maybe give 1 or 2 points of growth between the next jump, and then we'll go to the next one. So 1 to 5 million, 1 to 2 things.
Hey, your next hire, your second hire, your third hire, it's more important when you're trying to grow from 1 to 5 million. Those hires are more important than growing from 5 to 10 or 10 to 25. So you've got to figure out how to hire, key A players. Number one. Number two, cash flow. You're going to run out of cash. You're starting a business 1 to 5. You're going to need twice the amount of cash that you need to get from here to there. It's the number one reason why these businesses don't make it is cash flow. So those are 2 right off the top. And then the owner has got to be, I'm not joking, but 80 hours a week, and the owner's got to wear every hat in the business. They're taking out the trash on Friday night, and they're recruiting, and they're selling, and they do whatever it takes to close that deal, to get that sale, to make that client.
Okay. 5 to 10.
So growing from 5 to 10 is number one, sales plan, not business plan. So have a very well thought out sales plan. And by the way, a recruiting agency, a staffing company is a sales organization. So you could make the case that your sales plan is your business plan. But invariably, I get called from people that are 7 million in revenue, 8 million, whatever. Oh, my banker says I need a business plan. I said, tell your banker you don't need a business plan. You need a good, well thought out sales plan. Well, what's a sales plan, Benjamin? Value proposition, ideal client profile, the people, the top 25, top 50 lists. What's your specialization, tactics? Who in these accounts am I going to go after? What's the marketing strategy? So you're moving from 1 to 5. You're moving from reactive. God, I just need to get a dozen clients and get this much revenue rolling. So you're moving from 100% reactive to you're starting to plan, right? So, and the sales plan is more important than the business plan. Changes as you get larger. The other thing, growing from 5 to 10, is start thinking about inside recruiting managers. You have to force yourself at these, how can I spend 15, 20% of my time working on the business versus fighting fires all day or working in the business? So you got to figure out a way on how you can allocate that time, because these businesses are like octopuses. A staffing business, these tentacles will come up and grab you in the ass and pull you back down underwater in seconds. Like when you think, oh, I got a free hour to work on my business, up come the tentacles to grab you and pull you under the water. And so sales plan, figure out how to get, 10%, 15% of your time working on the business. And the way that you do that is you hire either an office manager that is unbelievable, right? That can manage the office, solve problems, or hiring, more likely than not, a recruiting manager that's going to be able to manage and grow and develop 3, 4 recruiters into 8 recruiters, 10 recruiters. Because you, at that 5 to 10, you're still going to need to go out and do sales. And that's another big mistake that I saw, is that people get to be 7 million in revenue and they stop doing sales. 50% of your job needs to be getting on the phone, visiting clients and things like that. So staying, because nobody can sell your business like you can. Nobody can sell my business like I can. And so you want to grow? Yeah.
All right.
You do it.
10 to 25.
So 10 to 25, that's where you still have a sales plan. So then you move into putting together more of a business plan, having some kind of a system. So for example, there's the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System out there. There's the Gazelles, there's the Scaling Up. There's a whole host of them. And then there's like a gazillion knockoffs off those. But having some kind of a system where you've got, okay, here's our goals, here's what we're going to try to get accomplished. There's some kind of a regular way of meeting with the team who's making decisions, making things happen. We used to think out yearly. We used to think out 3 years, which you still need to do in a business plan. But more importantly, you're setting key initiatives on a quarterly basis. This quarter, we've got to get our ATS fully implemented. This quarter, I've got to get my marketing. We got to get the website, done and up and running, or we got to get the marketing thing, or whatever. So setting those quarterly key initiatives and having them tied back to the metrics of the business. So having some kind of a system where, okay, you've got a plan, you've got quarterly initiatives, you've got metrics or measures, hard measures that you're looking at week in and week out. And it doesn't matter if you're a direct hire or you're a contract. Whatever those key performance indicators are for the business. We know what they are for sales reps and recruiters, right? Number of face-to-face meetings for sales reps, number of networking events, number of follow-up on referral leads from recruiters. Recruiters, hey, number of phone interviews, phone screens, number of submittals, number of interviews. We know what those are for salespeople and recruiters. Well, for the business, what's the KPIs for the business? Number of new accounts, number of clients billed, average fee, average billable hour, the head count, knowing what those key performance indicators are for the business. So you're moving now from thinking about producers to thinking about, I've got this entity, I got this business, and this business has got KPIs. And we're looking at that stuff weekly, not monthly, weekly. And when you see something, go down, then you're like, okay, let's look at that. Why did that go down? Oh, we lost a key account. Okay, so now what do? We got to go get that account. So those are the big things. And then the 10 to 15 million, a lot of times companies, the banks won't talk to companies up to 10 million in revenue. I mean, they'll give them like a crappy little line of credit and, we want you to sign your house and all that stuff. And so then they're forced into going into factoring relationships to finance receivables. So once you get like north of 10 million in revenue, you got to get off the factoring. You got to get smarter, cash flowing and all that stuff. Get out factoring, and then get a traditional line of credit with a bank. And you can even get a good traditional line of credit with a bank and maybe factor, maybe you've got a client concentration, so you factor a couple of accounts. So there's that whole financial management of the business, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And what about over 25?
Well, now you're moving in the middle market. So then the man or the woman or the married couple, now they begin to build their role change. And by the way, the people that own the business, your role is going to change from 1 to 5. Your job is going to change from 1 to 5, from 5 to 10. But when you want to grow significantly into the middle market, now you have to build a management team. Your number one focus becomes building where I've got a controller, I got a vice president of sales, I got a director of recruiting, director of operations, I have a director of IT, and you build that management team, and then you're responsible of managing the management team. And then from a decision-making purposes, it's not a Tom Kosnik making decisions. Now we have a decision-making tree, and it's the team that's making the decision to grow into. And then your vice president of sales is now responsible for putting the sales plan together, and your VP of ops for the recruiting plan. And then those two better be talking to one another, which is going to flow up into your business plan. And then your IT or director of IT is driving all the IT efficiencies and things like that. And then you're really thinking about, you've got cash flow now, so you can do things from a marketing perspective that you couldn't do earlier because you just didn't have the cash flow. So there'll be some things that you do, like maybe you start hosting a podcast. Just kidding. So but
smart idea.
And then the focus also for like the person at the top is business. What is our business model? And then how can we continue to refine that business model? So, their job are, going to the conferences, refining the business model. And by the way, Gosh, you know, I'm talking a lot here. So the business model is how you hire, who you hire, your technology, your marketing, all that stuff's got to align into the business model that you're taking to the marketplace. And the business model, by the way, has got to have some kind of a value proposition to its clients. You got to be able to walk into a client's office and they say, well, you know, why, Benjamin, why should I use your firm? And you got to be able to say, well, because our business model allows us to do X, Y, Z, which is better, faster, smarter than our competitors. And here are the statistics that we have on that. Yeah.
And I feel like we're not wrapping up this conversation yet, but I feel like I need to have another conversation with you down the road.
Happy to.
We're talking about all this growth, all this revenue. To hit those numbers, you also have to hire the best people. How do you find top performers? And then how do you develop top performers?
So those are two separate questions. So top performers, first off, if you're lucky enough to have looked into hiring a top performer, you got to put that, top performer, and you yourself are likely a top performer. Otherwise, you wouldn't own your own business. But anyway, you're really talking about three things. And that is, you have to have a good personality profile assessment on the front end. You have to have a good cultural assessment on the front end as well. So personality profile, we kind of know what makes a good salesperson, a great recruiter. They have the ability to remain in charge of a verbal transaction, right? They typically have healthy ego strength, which means that they get what they want. They go after it. They have goals, on and on and on. We know that they're people, but they're not like way out people. So like high extroverts, real high extroverts. This is the thing. My clients a lot of time make the mistake where they hire somebody who doesn't have strong ego strength, but they're highly extroverted. Oh my God, my clients are going to love this person, but they make terrible recruiters or salespeople. And the reason why is because they can't ask the tough questions. They can't negotiate, and they want to make friends and help people find jobs. And they don't realize that, this isn't social services. This is actually a business where we got to make money. Welcome to America. It's a capitalistic society. So, healthy ego, extroverted, but slightly. And then analytically, they have lower analytical skills. And that doesn't mean that they're bad in math or don't understand math. But what it means is that they make decisions not based on analysis. So for me, for example, I use the example, we just bought a new car. And so my wife, she'll go, oh gosh, I like this look of this car and this car and this car and this car. And so she'll go test drive them. And then she'll say, I want to buy that car. And when she says that, I say, okay, well, why don't you, those 4 cars? Why don't you give me those 4 cars? I'll get on the internet. I'll do all the research. And I'll kind of find out who's got good transmissions and which ones are a pain in the rear to work on or cost more money. And that's me. I make decisions based on gathering data. Real good salespeople and recruiters don't make decisions based on gathering data. We know that if they have good ego strength, and we know that if they make decisions based on intuition versus analysis, that equals drive, which is what you want. Drive. That was it. Every A performer's got drive. And then conformance, they have low conformance. So, which means that they don't take no for an answer. I've got a gazillion examples, but basically low conformance is hey, look, okay, I see the sign on the wall that says that I can't talk to hiring managers. Well, I'm going to figure out a way to talk to hiring managers. That's low conformance. So we know you have a good survey on the front end that can survey the personality characteristic traits. Those, and by the way, Benjamin, the hardcore personality characteristic traits, those are agenerational. Doesn't matter if you're a baby boomer, doesn't matter if you're a Gen Z, doesn't matter if you're a millennial. They don't change. We're Homo sapiens. These are hardcore personality characteristic traits. What does change are the work preferences. So you want to work remote, I want to work in an office. That's a work preference. And so your culture survey is going to tell you, well, first off, it's going to understand what your culture is. Number one, we're a decisive decision-making organization versus a loosey-goosey decision-making. We're a collaborative organization versus a individualistic. We're centralized versus decentralized. And people are attracted to certain cultures and they work better in certain cultures. So understanding, the understanding on the front end, the hardcore personality characteristics, understanding that there's a good cultural fit. Benjamin, how many times have you known a really good sales rep that went to go work for a staffing company, and it was a disaster.
I've seen that.
Yeah, you have seen that. Yeah. And the reason why that is, the individual probably has the hardcore personality characteristic traits to succeed as a superior or an A+ sales rep, but it was a cultural mismatch. All right. And so they're a fish out of water in that culture. They're never going to gain traction. They're always going to be swimming upstream. They're always going to be fighting against the status quo. It never works. So, in terms of onboarding, those are like two simple things that companies can do. You can get far more complicated with looking at your A players and creating job profiles and then creating interviewing questions, looking for specific responses that would respond to. If you don't have a hiring process, that's another thing where, you should be, every interview you're doing to hire A+ people, you should have like set questions. You're going to ask the same questions, the same 20 people that you're going to interview. Because otherwise there's no way you can compare candidate 3 to candidate 7 to candidate 17. And you look at the way that they respond, to those questions, and look, they're responding to these questions the exact same way, that Johnny is responding to these questions, and Johnny is a $10 million a year in revenue producer, on and on and on. So you can get much more complicated than that. But gosh, even if you just have a good personality profile, understand what your culture is, that's going to help you. And then the whole onboarding process, it takes a full year to get really orientated into an organization. And that is orientated in terms of the buying cycles of your clients, the cycle of the industry, the cycle of what happens in the business in the fall versus the spring versus the summer versus, all that stuff. And how we celebrate birthdays and when do we go out and celebrate little successes and things like that. But it takes a full year. But the whole onboarding process, you got to have some kind of a training methodology where you're training them on the ATS system, you're training them on the sales methodology, you're training them on the recruiting methodology. And then comes management, which is very challenging in today's day and age. I don't wish managing people to anybody. It's very challenging.
Well, that goes into another question that I have. You have an absolute A player that's just absolutely crushing it. You're looking at growing your business. What happens if they, I want to go grow my own business now or want to go start my own business? How do you keep these A players? How do you keep these big billers that are just so dominant? They've built their brands. You've helped them build their brands. How do you keep them for the long run?
The short answer is have some kind of a deferred compensation component that you can offer them some kind of a insurance policy that's theirs, that regardless if they stay or leave later on, that they can take with them. That's part of their retirement package. The phantom stock thing, there's different ways to do that. There's qualified deferred comp, unqualified deferred comp. So you can certainly introduce those kinds of components with A players. And then the other thing is you got to get that A player educated, because a lot of times they don't understand, this A players make terrible managers. They just make terrible managers. It's a whole different skill set. They're A players for a reason. But if they really understood, what's it going to take to go start my own business financially, what's it going to set them back financially? So if you can roll out and introduce to A players a plan to say, hey, stick with our organization, you can move into these kinds of roles, you can get this kind of decision-making authority, you can make this kind of money. You got to start thinking in those kinds of terms to retain A players. What's the Allegis? They had a great program. They still have a great program. They figured that out on the front end years ago. So there are things like that you can do. And invariably, we do a lot of compensation analysis and a lot of compensation design work, in all these areas that I've been talking about. But invariably, I'll get with a key employee, an A sales rep, hey, I want ownership. But, oh my Lord, they don't realize what ownership means. They don't realize it from a tax perspective, and they don't realize it from a fiduciary practice. They don't realize it from a liability practice. When an owner comes to me and says, hey, I've got this person that wants to do X, Y, Z, I'm saying, well, let me schedule a call with them, and I'll just ask them some questions and get them on track to doing some research. Invariably they come back and they're like, Tom, I never even thought about that. Didn't even think about the liability perspective and the fact that something happens and we get sued by the state of California, that now I'm responsible on that. My name gets named on that lawsuit. I never thought of that. I like living in California. I don't want to move to Mississippi where the state doesn't suit staffing companies. Anyway, I'm being a little facetious, but
so everybody moved to Mississippi then, right?
Yeah. No.
So, okay, I know we've covered a lot, and I feel like there's more that we can cover, but like, I'm kind of curious, like you have somebody that comes into like your organization or somebody that calls you up for help. Like you've had many of these conversations over the years. Is there a question that you wish a recruiting firm owner would ask you, but they never really do?
It's a funny thing. A lot of people hire us and pay us good money to coach and give them advice. And a lot of times they don't take our advice. That's not just the staffing industry, by the way. I've got associates that are organizational development, growth strategy consultants. And so they all kind of experience that. So the question is, I know I need to change in order to grow my business. Are you the organization that can help me change? So that would be the question. I mean, if somebody comes to me and asks me that question, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we can work together. This is going to be fun.
And you've helped a lot of people grow over the years. Has there been like a firm or a company that you've seen just go from like 5 million to like 100 million?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I know we've covered a lot, but is there something that really just stands out about that leader?
I would say they have charisma. They have drive. I know somebody that took a company from $1 million of EBITDA to $3.5 million of EBITDA. True story, professional, direct hire recruiting and contract staffing. $1 million of EBITDA to $3.5 million of EBITDA in 3 years. Who does that? And the crazy thing is that this guy never worked in the staffing industry prior to that. What did he have? What did he do? He just knew how to solve problems, build culture. He knew how to be present to every one of his employees in a way that his employees they raved about this guy. And they still do. Occasionally I find somebody and like, oh, so-and-so, God, I loved working with so-and-so. Those guys that grow companies from 5 to 100 million in revenue, they have a certain, charisma might not be the right word, but they have that certain where they walk into the office and people, they just like, I don't want to disappoint. I don't know if you're married, I'm married. But it's true with marital relationships as well. My wife has made me a better man, better husband, better father. And so business leaders that when somebody comes in and they meet that leader and encounter that leader, start developing a relationship with that leader, the employees that know like, oh, this person is going to make me a better person. Those are the people that really, we talk about it. How do people run through brick walls for you? Business planning, sales planning, metrics, comp plans, all that stuff's important. But now we're talking about the affect, right? The affect, the heart. And then when you're able to do that, I mean, this is no big surprise, right, Benjamin? Like when you got a leader that's like engaging with their people like that. And now I'm just thinking in my head of how many people I know in the staffing industry that are like this, that like grew their businesses like that. I like being around them. They're just like great people to be around because their energy, that just goes out to the client base. So then the clients are like, wow, like this sales guy's not like any other sales guy that I meet from the staffing industry. I got to find out more about this business. That's how it goes, right? This, I mean, people do business with people that they like. You got to make that affect connection, and then they'll go figure out and dot the I's, cross the T's, and figure, okay, yes, I'm going to do business with Benjamin. But you got to be able to connect on the heart level, an affect level first. The leaders that can do that, they're going to be successful wherever they go.
Can somebody learn how to do that?
You can get coaching, you can get mentors to help you do that. You can refine your skills. You got to get comfortable in your own skin. You've got to learn to really be present to your people. The whole thing where, Benjamin's walking into my office and I'm looking at my phone and, okay, what do you need? How can I help you? Is this going to take long, Benjamin? Versus you walk into my office. Hey, Benjamin, how you doing? How's your day going? What can I help you with? Sit down. Being really present to, look, and we all read faces, right? You're having, right? Every day. That's a billion years of being Homo sapiens. You have an employee that walks into the office, like you immediately know they didn't sleep well the night before, or they're stressed. And hey, like, you look stressed. What's going on? When people feel comfortable to then, like, oh my gosh, my mom fell and she broke her ankle and she's in traction and she's like, and I'm just, and ... So people, the employees, they understand, you're connecting with them on a whole. So can you learn that? You can get mentors, you can coach, meditation, frankly. I mean, read the gurus. They all say the same thing. If you read Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titan, Tim said when he was doing the interviewing for that book, he said 100% every Titan that I interviewed journaled, basically took time to focus, to pen, paper, whether it's a thank you journal, whether it's, here are the things I need to personally work on, 100%. But the other thing is that the whole meditation thing, just being able to like get myself in a quiet space and be able to focus, learning how to focus, and then being able to take that focus to my relationships with people, whoever those people are. We all experience it, right? But when we're in the service sector and we experience somebody who, like, all of this noise, I am 100% here for you. We know it. So yes, you can learn to do that.
For the listeners, I think I have like another 5 or 10 more things I want to go to, but like just because of time, we're going to jump over to the quickfire questions and,
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, this has been awesome. And make sure to like, follow Tom on LinkedIn so you could just, see more of us.
Yeah, sure. Reach out, but do me an invite on LinkedIn. We're posting stuff all the time as well. So,
all right, heading over to the quickfire questions, we're going to make this instead of like recruiters, we're going to make it more on firm owners. If somebody's looking at just starting their own recruiting firm, what advice would you give them?
Starting their own recruiting firm, I would say build your own personal brand on social media. You probably already have some kind of a personal brand, but you got to start building your own personal brand. The other piece that I would suggest is find a mentor. Find somebody that owns a recruiting firm. I'm 63, so I'm saying, but find somebody that like is in tune with what's all the changes that we've been talking about in this podcast, or that's even open to those changes. Me personally, I've had mentors through my career, but I wish I had more mentors when I was first starting out. It would have been invaluable to me. Those are two things that I would say.
And the second question is somebody that's had a firm for a while, we'll say like small firm, but they've been stuck and every year they want to grow, but they've been stuck for a while. What advice would you give them to become unstuck?
Yeah, to become unstuck, again, the peer groups are fantastic. There's so many out there now. It's funny, the more technologically we become, the peer roundtable experience keeps growing and growing and growing. So find a good peer roundtable, not a family member, not a business partner. These have to be people that are outside your organization that are going to tell you what you don't want to hear. So now it's your decision to either, take that in or not. But look, if you're stuck, if your business is stuck, you're stuck. And so you've got to be thinking differently. You've got to be behaving differently. Having some kind of a peer group that's going to tell you what you don't want to hear. And then you've got to be able to decipher what they're telling you. You got to put together an action plan on yourself. And I would recommend, you can put this in the notes there, The Power to See Ourselves. It was written back in 1962, James Paul Brower. That's a fantastic read. So if you're looking to develop and grow, he's got a whole methodology in there. You can apply it to managers and or business owners. You're always seeking advice. And look, the other thing, Benjamin, is you got to have humility, right? I don't know everything. I'm going to make mistakes. Nothing's going to be perfect. Never going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be hills and valleys. That's life. So you just got to take it with a grain of salt and roll with it. Those are really, truly, those are the best. And a lot of times, look, even though, my spouse works with me in a business, but a lot of times your spouse is not the best person to give you that advice, because you're living with them and they love you and they care for you, so you really need people that are going to tell you like, Tom, this, and it's not fun. It ain't fun. It ain't easy, growing, developing as an individual. It's work. So you got to be willing to put that in.
Has there been a book that's had a huge impact on your own personal career?
The Power to See Ourselves is an article that had a big impact on me because after I read that article, I started to utilize the practices that he talks about there on my own development. So that was really important. The only business book that I've read nonstop, cover to cover, I've never had that experience with a business book. The only business book that I've read is the first Break All the Rules. I read that book after I finished my master's in organizational development from Bowling Green State University for all you Ohioans out there. But first, Break All the Rules, which talks about the 4 things that managers, that they discovered. There's 2 seismic things that happened in that book. One, they talk about the 4 things that their research discovered that the best producing managers do different from the other managers. And by the way, those 4 things are 180-degree opposite of what they've been teaching people in business school. It's built on the foundations of positive psychology, which is all about the strengths that we used to think, and I was trained in, hey, you've got weaknesses here and here and here. Tom, you got to go work on your weaknesses, right? I've run 30 marathons in my day, Benjamin. Nobody needed to tell me how to run a marathon. I knew how to run a marathon. I knew how to place between the 2 and 5% mark. I had goals. I had plans, all that stuff. Basketball is a different story. So somebody came to me and said, Tom, you need to work on playing basketball. Anyway, so that resource there, the foundation of it is the positive psychology, working on gravitating towards your strengths versus your weaknesses. So, anybody that hasn't read it, you're missing out. You're missing out.
You've had a lot of success. You've worked with a lot of successful companies. You watch them scale. You've helped them scale. What do you think has been a huge contributor to your own personal success?
My clients, first off, God almighty. My clients have taught me so much about the industry and about growing businesses. I'm very fortunate in that regard. It's funny, I even have clients that I will call up and say, hey, I need your professional advice. They're honored, actually, when I do that. We've got wonderful clients, so that's one thing. In terms of my own personal, my wonderful wife, she has got 2 sisters, and when she's introducing me to somebody she's never met before, like, oh yeah, this is Tom, and she say, I have 2 sisters. My one sister married 100% Italian. My other sister married 100% Republican, and I married a guy that's 100% Polish. And I say, honey, you talk about that like it's a bad thing. I said, don't you know Copernicus was Polish? We'd still be thinking the world was flat if it wasn't for a Polish guy. But I call it the Polish persistence. Again, back to the very beginning of the podcast with my MDiv, I'm 3/4 way through, and I made it 3/4 way through. I got to finish it. But business, and Benjamin, this, man, there's a lot of days where you're walking in the valley, right? You're slugging poop. And you're like, man, is the sun ever going to come out? And you gotta have the chutzpah. You gotta have the persistence to kind of walk through that. So I certainly have done that. You can't be afraid to invest. So I've invested in my business. I've worked hard, and we want to try new things. It's going to cost me $100,000. We cash flow it out. Let's go. Let's see if we can make this work. And some ideas work, and some ideas are lost at the craft table. So those are the things for me personally that have worked.
You mentioned the perseverance in those dark days and those hard days, but outside of perseverance, how do you make it through those hard weeks or potentially hard months?
First off, I got a loving spouse, a loving, forgiving spouse. And then secondly, I have a small cadre of other professionals that I can call and rely on. And I learned this early on, actually. And sometimes, I have a short list where I'm just having a terrible day. And a lot of times, people go home and they're, having 2 or 3 martinis after a terrible day. But, when I'm having a terrible day, terrible week, I've got a short list of people that I'll call and say, hey, Ted, tell me a funny joke. Make me laugh. You got to have folks that can just, get you laughing, get you smiling again. The other thing is back to basics, big man, back to basics. Exercise, food, and sleep. When it's coming down on me, I got to make sure I'm eating good food. because I'm going to gravitate towards eating bad. You're going to want to eat bad food. You got to get enough sleep. Man, I really don't feel like hitting the gym today. That's when you got to hit the gym, because it just releases all that stress inside of you. And those are basics. And I've stayed faithful to those three. I used to run after work, but I'm too old and I'm too tired to go hit the gym after work. But in the morning, at lunchtime, it's a great thing.
How far do you normally run?
Well, I don't do marathons anymore, but I'll run sometimes I run just a few miles, like 3 miles. Sometimes I'll run 5 to 7 miles, something like that. I can still do a 3K and do pretty well for an old timer.
Marathons, I've hung up that hat. Don't want to do them again. Have no desire.
Well, how many have you done?
I think 5 or 6, probably like 6 or 7.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Less than 1% of the population runs a marathon.
Good for them.
Yeah. So you're in the top 1%.
Recently, it's been traveling for a half marathon has been like the thing to do. So we did a half marathon in Nice, France recently.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. The full marathon was Nice to Canes, but halfway, stop, ride the bus back.
Yeah. Nice. It's good for you. That sounds like fun.
It's like a travel thing now. So
I haven't done any marathons in Europe. And the only international marathon I did was the Detroit Free Press, which starts in Detroit. It goes over the Ambassador Bridge and into Windsor, Canada, and then under the tunnel, under the Detroit River and all that. I've heard that the Victoria, British Columbia marathon is a beautiful marathon. It was on my radar, but I hear it runs along the water for all 26 miles. And, anyway.
Yeah, I'm all about like the destination, training to stay healthy, not like training to like race hardcore anymore. But yeah, we do it as a destination to make it a trip now.
Nice.
Here's actually my favorite question. And you've kept the same business. Normally I ask this like 2 different ways, but you've been in business for so long. With all the successes that you've had, all the clients that you worked with, the crap that you've dealt with, if you can go back in time and give yourself advice, what would you tell yourself?
The advice that I would give myself would be, don't be so hard-headed. So early on, my way or the highway. I was smarter than everybody, better than everybody, quicker than everybody. I would say the advice that I would have given myself is not be so hard-headed. And the other piece would be, or the other side of that coin is, have a little bit more humility about who you are and what you're doing. Somebody once told me, and this was later on, because you meet these folks at conferences and you're like, gosh, this guy can't even tie a shoe. Like literally, so how's this guy running an $80 million a year business? And somebody said to me, well, he may have not figured out how to tie a shoe, but he sure has figured something out. And that's what you got to go find out. What did that guy find out that you didn't find out? Versus, I'm Tom Kosnik. I can figure this out. I can make this happen. I can build this house and ... So, yeah, humility. Not be so hard-headed, and then really have more humility early on. That would have been
awesome. Well, Tom, before I let you go, if somebody wants to follow you, how do they go about doing that?
Tom G. Kosnik on LinkedIn, and then just that you have the option to the VIIs group, to follow the VIIs group. And then you see all our posts, and we pump out a lot of things. I do like these little 10-minute videos on different things in the industry, whether it's challenges, whether it's growth strategies, whether it's compensation. So I try to get, a few of those out. And then we do a lot of these podcasts, things like that. Thank you so much for inviting me, Benjamin. I really enjoyed our conversation.
This has been fun. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
Just you can find us at VIIsgroup.com. And reach out to us on LinkedIn. That's really the tool that we use. We use LinkedIn more than our database.
the fancy CRM system that you guys bought.
and the rest of 2024 is likely to be a slog. And we'll see, hopefully 2025 will bring us better times in the staffing industry.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I just want to say thank you. It's been tough for so many recruiters out there. It's been hard, but you're working with people that are growing. You're working with organizations that are still winning in this environment. And thank you for spending some time just sharing with the listeners, like what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they can become a better leader themselves. So for the recruiters out there, I want you to keep crushing it. Make 2024 your best year yet. And remember, everything that you do right now for the rest of this year lines you up to have a 2025 where you can absolutely crush it. So keep going, guys.